Good evening and welcome to the rescheduled regular City Council meeting, City of Nacogdoches, April 23rd, 2024. Kathleen, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Sure. Dear Lord, thank you for your many blessings, including this beautiful weather. Thank you for our city and all of the wonderful people here. Please bless our work tonight. Please bless our city and all who work and live and visit here, and help us be your light tonight and always. We ask all of these things in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. You'll stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, next item on the agenda will be open forum. We have any? Okay, there being none, we will go to the consent agenda and the items to be removed from the consent agenda.
We approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll go to the regular scheduled agenda items, and I would like to move item 6D to 6A. We have someone that lives quite some way from here, and he needs to get back on the road. So if we'll move, if it's okay with y'all, we'll move item D to the first item and then go after that. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Todd Semino, Finance Director. Before I introduce the city's independent auditor, I'd like to thank their firm for really going above and beyond the call of duty this year. As you know, most of their clients are probably audit clients in the governmental arena. They all have a September year end, so they plan their audits out as far as a year in advance. And so with me getting here in mid-January, they really had to catch me up mid-audit. We basically had to hit a reset button on the audit process. They were more than gracious in helping me get caught up to speed to get them what they needed to do to get the audit delivered. 23 days late, I think, is a great thing considering what we went through with the turnover in the finance staff and everything like that. So again, I want to thank Clayton and his firm. And at this time, Clayton Rogers will come up. He's with Patilla Brown and Hill, and he'll go through the audit presentation with you.
Mayor, Council, thank you for having me. And I guess I'll go ahead and smooth transition there. He shouldn't sell himself. This is a great way to start. He shouldn't sell himself short. Government finance has not gotten any easier in the last year, and coming in and learning a whole new city with a whole new set of books mid-audit is also a feat in and of itself. So before I go any further, I would like to thank Todd and his staff, really everyone at the city that we worked with in finance. Everyone was helpful, everyone was forthcoming and got us what we needed to be able to, I will point out, stand here in front of you a little bit earlier than we were last year. That was pointed out to us, which I think is worth mentioning for the quality of the staff that was helping us out on this. So, I'm going to go through the overview of the annual comprehensive financial report, talk about the audit process, and touch on a few highlights, and of course answer any questions that you might have. Now, we did have a little bit of an audible for today. We were planning on, usually, in years past, we will have shown up with the final booklet. We had some technical issues on our end. If you've ever been on a computer and the loading bar stops at 99%, that's kind of what has happened with the audit. So we technically have not finalized the audit. However, it is very minor dotting I's, crossing T's that is left to be done. And so for the purposes of this presentation, we consider the audit to be final and that none of that affects any of these results we're about to talk about. So as Todd said, my name is Clayton. I was the manager on your engagement. John Manning, the audit partner, couldn't be here tonight. We also have Kent Willis, our concurring partner, who takes a high-level look at our work papers and the report, looks at the results of our audit and makes sure that we're putting everything in there that we need to be doing. So at least 3 CPAs were putting eyeballs on your numbers and your financial statements. And we're very happy to be able to say, spoiler alert, that we were able to give a clean opinion. So just a quick overview of the annual comprehensive financial report. You can really keep a pin in this for when you look at the final document in a little more detail. It goes over that you'll see are some portions of this document that are not audited. The introductory section up front, required supplementary information, and the statistical section. The meat and potatoes is the basic financial statements. That's why we are here. Your government-wide financials, your fund financials, and those notes. That's really the core of what our audit is about. But there's that C in ACFR, means comprehensive, and issuing that report is in that form is not required. And in fact, if it was in just its required form, most of that unaudited information would not be there. So I think that speaks to the depth and breadth of the information that staff is trying to make available to users, going above and beyond just what's required by GAAP. So let's talk about the audit just a little bit. So what is the financial statement audit? What's the purpose of it? Well, our goal is reasonable assurance that the financials are materially correct, and that's 2 very important points. The independent auditor's report is a lot of word soup in some ways. To boil it down, we are trying to opine. We're getting a high level of assurance. It's not absolute. We don't look at every dollar amount. We don't look at every transaction. It is very risk-based, and it is in some respects a very high level review over certain areas. But it is a high level of assurance that the financials are materially correct. Material being what would influence decision making. So I saw on the agendas that y'all were just recently having some work sessions over issuing a bond and some of those types of things. Well, your bondholders would probably be one of the most important users of your financials. So what would, if there was something that was wrong or omitted, what would influence their decision making about, for example, if the city complied with covenants, if the city is remaining liquid, all those types of things. So for example, the whole report is rounded to the dollar, so any given number might be off a dollar one way or the other. Obviously, our materiality level is much, much higher than that, but there are certain things that are below the scope of the audit. Management of the city is responsible for the financial statements and everything that's in them. Our responsibility is to audit them. We did help prepare the financials, as is very customary for small to medium-sized governments. But that ultimately we refrain from making any high-level judgments or decisions about the financials, and that management's accepted responsibility that they think everything is right, even though we're rendering an opinion as well. And at the bottom of the screen, I already stole my own thunder. We were able to issue an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. So what that means is that yes, based on our audit, everything that we saw was materially correct in accordance with accounting principles, and that there's nothing that was incorrect or omitted that would influence decision-making, in our opinion. So that is the highest level of assurance that we can give. That is the best conclusion based on the audit. You get a 2-for-1 deal, ironically called a single audit. When the single audit is triggered, you get a second audit, but they call it a single audit. Why? I don't know. When the city spends more than $750,000 of federal money in a given fiscal year, this federal single audit is required by federal law. You can see there on the slide that the city expended about $1.3 million of federal funding. Right at about $1 million of that was several different forms of FEMA funding, mostly from the winter storm and from mutual aid with the fire department. And so you can picture in your head there was about 1.3 million of federal money spent. The city spent about $1 million of it, and that program was what we did a deep dive on. So based on certain criteria, we do a deep dive on compliance. And again, we're going for reasonable assurance of material compliance. Not that every single string that the feds might have attached to that money was complied with, but the really big important ones. And you can see there, we were able to issue an unmodified opinion as well, which means that we found no significant non-compliance that would be material. And also because we're dealing with federal money, the feds don't want good things to happen by accident. And so we'd be required to report not only if we'd found non-compliance, but if we had found problems with internal control over compliance. In other words, if the city had complied with those things by accident, we would be required to report it here. But we're happy to report that based on our audit, we saw none of those types of holes in internal control, so that we were able to issue a clean opinion with no findings. Now, I'll step further in just a moment about talking about the audit process as a whole. I know one of the questions that was in the forefront of the mind was about some issues that might have occurred during the year. And so when we issue our final report, we do anticipate having something in writing related to certain, not compliance controls, but related to the financial statements, primarily over the purchasing card process. Not that there were no internal controls or that things weren't being followed, but that maybe some things could be tightened up in a way that would be of such significance that would be worthy of being brought to your attention. However, the thing I'd emphasize about that is that there's two types of findings. I like to call them the bad and the less bad. The bad means that we think that control deficiency could potentially cause the financials to be materially misstated. However, in this case, based on what we looked at through the course of our audit, we felt that while it was worthy of attention by governance, that would be you, it's not something that really rose to the level of causing any material issues or close to material issues. Furthermore, I think the other thing is that it is the best kind of finding that you can have, which is one that has already been corrected. The city, any issues that were found, the city identified them themselves and has already taken steps throughout the last few months to implement some additional processes there. Any questions so far before I move on? Great. So a number of things that we're required to report to you as the governing body. If we had found significant difficulties, if we had had lots of issues during the audit or disagreements with management, a laundry list of various things that if they had happened, we'd be required to report them to you. But I'm happy to report that there were none of those things throughout the course of the audit. A couple of other things, there was a new accounting standard this year that was a big headache for us that wound up not affecting the financials at all. We spent a lot of time working with staff to looking at it and making sure that it wasn't significant, but that ultimately that GASB 96 that you see for software subscriptions is not reflected in the financials because it was not ultimately significant. So for the audit process, I thought it would be good. We spend a lot of time talking about the numbers and fund balance, but I wanted to touch on a couple of points related to really what does the audit entail specifically. We know what the end goal is. We know where we've gotten. Our first phase we call planning or interim work. That usually takes place August or September before year end. And we talk, mainly we do a lot of talking. And we go to, I listed out some of the main areas that we look at: accounts payable, payroll, human resources, utility billing is one of the big ones. We get an understanding of those internal controls to make sure that we're, if there are any significant issues there, that we're seeing them, identifying them, and planning to work around those things in our audit. But ultimately, we don't do that to find problems. We do it to tailor our audit procedures. We do some tests of controls and then, of course, talk with management about, okay, what's changed? What do we need to be planning for when we do final field work? We did final field work in the late fall, and then as staff transitioned, some of the back end of our procedures were done over the last few months. One thing I'd like to point out is while there are certain things that we look at a very high level, there are certain things that we don't. We send out bank confirmations so that basically every dollar of the city's that was in a bank account, we have confirmed directly with the bank that was the balance there. Additionally, we get confirmations from the county about what property taxes were collected and sent. We also are able to run data from the Texas Comptroller, so for any sales taxes and state and federal grants, we're able to nail those down to the dollar as well. We do a number of test-based, sample-based tests, that's what I was trying to say, looking at the details, like pulling samples of transactions, kind of what you usually think of when you think of an audit. We also do lots of analytical work. For example, the Convention and Visitors Bureau is supposed to get a certain percentage of the city's hotel taxes, and so we kind of look at that based on that known percentage that, okay, if the city's revenue is this, the CVB should be 72.5% of it. So just a few highlights of the audit process and what got us to this point. And a couple of highlights, just very, very briefly, the ACFR is about a 140-page document. I would love, as a numbers guy, to sit here and give you the 5 minutes per page version. But in the interest of not...
You're good.
In the interest of not putting everyone to sleep, I included just a few highlights. The biggest question we always get is, well, how are we doing in the general fund? So you can see here, over the last 5 years, we've got unassigned fund balance in the general fund. And as I was putting this together, I added the information out to the left. 15.8 million sounds like a great number, but what does it mean? So what we do is divide that into expenditures in the general fund, and you can see out on the left, after a little bit of a dip in 2022, the general fund increased to just a shave over 6 months in fund balance, which is a very, very good common reserve level to be at. GFOA recommends generally 3 months as a bare minimum, with generally 4 to 6 being much more recommended. Similarly, your enterprise funds, we have here over the last 3 years comparisons of revenues and expenses. You can see that expenditures increased a little bit more than revenue did this last year, but that operating surplus has still been there for the last several years. Something else that I think is just not necessarily something that feeds directly into the audit, but I think it's really interesting to see too. This chart here shows exactly all of the city's funds together, what was spent on what function. So you can see, of course, that public safety with 18 million and water and sewer with 13 million leading the way with what did the city spend money on this last year. So again, I could put you all to sleep with all sorts of detail that we could go over, but I'd like to turn it over to you for what questions you might have about the financials, the audit process, or anything else.
I've got one comment or question. Based on, you did this last year, didn't you? You were here last year.
Yes, sir.
Your hair was longer. You got a haircut. Okay. Knowing what we've been through in our finance department, has this been easier for you than the past years?
Overall, I'd say yes. Certainly there is a lot of growing pains, as Todd said, when someone transitions in. Obviously, Todd, being very experienced, coming from a much larger city, has lots and lots of expertise. But as he and I were talking last week, we talk about having all your ducks in a row, and he said when I hit the front door on day one, I didn't even know where all the ducks were. So there was a very steep learning curve there, but once everyone was out and he was in and hit the ground running, it was smooth sailing from there.
I'd like to just take this time to commend Todd for he's done an exceptional job. That whole department was blown up. I mean, with nobody's fault, but I mean, he literally came in and had to rebuild, and there wasn't but a few left standing, maybe 3 left in that whole department, and he single-handedly, he went through assistant city manager, and now we have our permanent city manager. And he has done, I'd like to thank Todd very much for what you've done. You have done a great job, because everybody was a little uneasy, but we know we had the right guy in that department to bring that thing together. And you've really done a good job, you and your staff, and I really appreciate it. And Benita, where's Benita at? She left? Yeah, there she is.
She's hiding.
Okay, that's it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
I just have one question. You mentioned about the purchase card, and you said there was procedures in place, and the process was being followed, but yet we had issues in protecting the city funds. If the process and procedures was in place and being followed, how did we get to the point that we didn't do well in that area?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the inherent limitations of internal control. You have two people, and that can be a control, but at the same time, controls can sometimes, especially at smaller entities, only be as good as the people who are following them. And I think in this case in particular, it seemed that the controls did function. It was simply that maybe the city would like to have identified issues maybe a little bit sooner or at a little bit tighter level. And so I think it's something that we've worked with some cities with $200 and $300 and $400 million budgets that run probably a quarter of that through P cards, and the process that they're following to make sure that that's being done correctly would probably suffocate Nacogdoches city staff. So it does have to be right sized for the entity, but that with that there come the trade-off that you hopefully will catch all of the big things and most of the not as big things, but that some of the not every single thing might be caught quite as soon as you would ideally like. And so it was in this case that city staff was like, okay, we really want this to be a little bit firmer and tighter, so we're going to shore up these processes so that we don't like the level that this was at, so that we're going to lower it down.
So
Okay, I'm sorry.
okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You identify issues. Do you make recommendations?
We do, and I think that was, as I said earlier, it was one of the things that when city staff started bringing some of the things to our attention, it was the best situation for us as the auditor, and that they were already coming to us with solutions. And I would not want to get to lying off the top of my head on what all those things are. Todd was able to give me an extended conversation on all of it. But that certainly it was something that we were discussing with them as they were going along, like, hey, this is some of the things we're gonna do. And that we were agreeing that, yeah, that sounds like a lot of what would be helpful to implement.
Thank you, Mayor.
So we have changed some procedures in the P card then, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
So when can we expect to see that final report?
Sometime within the next few days or the next week or so.
So our responsibility here, as far as the annual audit report, is to receive a report from the auditor and approve that report. Is that correct?
So I think,
There's typically not even action required on council. His job and our job is to inform council about the audit and the results of the audit. Usually it's done in a presentation, but we're just trying to be as transparent as possible, trying to earn trust through transparency. And so that's why it was listed as an agenda item, but there's no action you formally need to take other than you've been informed of the audit and have received it.
yeah, it's, some cities or counties may have, by charter or by policy that they are required to approve it, but that, under statute and really, at the end of the day, it would be mostly an acceptance.
But our agenda item says consider approval.
And I believe that's what we've done historically, is to actually approve it. And I just have a little bit of discomfort not having actually read the report myself.
Absolutely.
At 99.9% when it stalled, did it recognize there was so much wrong? Did it just go back and redo? That was just I didn't mean that one. Take that back.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say that we appreciate not only identifying issues that needed to be corrected, then correcting all the issues, but the way in which council has been kept informed and involved in the process. And that really helps with transparency. It helps with people's trust in government. I was at every level, including our city manager, human resources. I think at every level, this has just been an outstanding process, and I am so grateful to everyone. We are all so grateful. I would clap again, but that would be redundant.
And to say, just to be 23 days off the mark based on what we've been through is remarkable.
That's great, yeah.
There's other places, municipalities and districts that go year and a half before they get you a audit.
Can we
Yes,
go
sir.
back to that pie chart for a moment?
Sure.
I just have a question. It seems like, as I remember it, the last time you came, when you had long hair, you said something about one thing that was a little wonky to you was the inter-office transfers were up at around 23% or something like that. And I could be real wrong, but that's what I remember. And it seems like now that intergovernmental is at, is it 1% or something? Is that changed, or am I completely off base here?
I'm trying to remember the specific comment. I
think you said at that time, you said normal scale for that was about 3% going back and forth from different bodies in this pie chart, and that ours was a little high, you thought.
maybe we were talking about the subsidy between the water sewer fund in general, perhaps?
Maybe.
Yeah, and I think that certainly was something that gets looked at, and I think that's one of the things that actually just last week, the GASB dropped a new accounting standard that's a few years off, that they're going to change some of the presentation with when is something just a one-time donation versus what might be considered an operating subsidy.
Oh, okay.
That's still obviously several years off, but that I think that's part of what they're wanting to look at is, and that's something that we look at is the purpose of those transfers. Like, is it a one-time thing? Is it an ongoing subsidy? So that was probably some of what that was geared toward. Although I don't believe when we put this together that transfers were reflected in these figures.
Okay. There may have been some pay raises that were not permanent or something, maybe some bonuses. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Beverlin was trying to.
I was just going to say, we've been adding several other controls at different places, or checks and balances. Not only, extra sets of eyes on things like the P card and what's being purchased and who's approving it, things like that, but also to make sure we're in compliance with our own purchasing policies, state law in terms of purchasing, as well as the charter. So use some of the things implemented a few other places where it seems like a novel idea, but when we even get a, let's say a contract's approved and then something comes across my desk, it's checked once the first invoices come, it's checked. Jerry checks it to make sure it's compliant. Case checks it, finance checks it, purchasing checks it before it gets to my desk instead of everything. So we're trying to add its speed versus accuracy. Some of these things we do think is definitely, it will slow things down a bit, but we're going to have a lot of expenditures and a lot of things in motion with the bond projects, and we need to make sure that that's tightened up. And so it is a little bit more time, but I think it saves us a lot more headache long-term. So we haven't just done it in the areas that that the audit is touching upon, but we're doing it across multiple areas.
I think that's great.
And one of the other issues is people having the comfort to to ask a question, to make an observation that something might not be right, and I think that we have better processes with that. If you want to speak to that, or, you know.
Well, I think we're trying to have a team approach, a collaborative approach, but by the same token, if you think something's off, say something as well. And that goes into every project or every initiative. We really try to kind of war game that internally with the staff. So, you know, you're going to see the agendas get longer and longer, or contract amendments or change orders and things like that, which is it's kind of part of the process once you get into capital projects. And you've mentioned, you know, we talked about this earlier. We also had the call earlier with S&P, you know, heading into the bond sale. And so all eyes are on, we know that, and this is also an area we haven't gotten deep into on that level of that many capital projects, especially with bonds. So I can just say that everyone is talking to each other, and if we see anything we need to improve, we're doing that internally. And then obviously, mentioned, you know, Todd's coming in from the outside, I'm coming in from the outside, and then we lean on, you know, where we've been, what we've done, and anyone else we need to, and as that moves forward. So I think at the end of the day is to be better than we were always and continuously improve. And that would be, if we were here for 20 years, we'd be wanting to do that anyway. And just also thank all the predecessors that came before us, because they worked with what they had to. So thank y'all.
Todd, are you satisfied with this audit?
Completely satisfied it's finally over.
Yeah.
It was a big learning process, but your systems and processes that are here were easy to follow and duplicate. Since there's been a lot of talk about, you know, what kind of changes are we making, I want to give you some real life examples that these are changes we've made to internal controls in the 3 months that I've been here. So first, on the consent agenda, y'all approved a contract for a procurement specialist, recognized by the state of Texas as a procurement specialist. Now, that's just a contingency contract, but we have over $15 million of bond revenue that we're going to have to spend. A lot of that has specialized procurement standards that we have to meet when spending bond money. We have over $8 million of American Rescue Plan funds that we still have to spend. Those are highly regulated in procurement. Our auditor here will tell you most things that'll trip you up in an audit are procurement and related to federal funds. So we want to make sure we're procuring our dollars legally. And not saying Drew doesn't know what he's doing. Drew's very competent. He knows what he's doing, but we feel these are specialized dollars that we're spending. We want to make sure we're on top of it. So that was one thing. So kudos to council for, you know, approving that contract. Things that we want to do in finance are segregate duties. An example is you don't want the same person setting up a vendor as that person's paying the vendor. So we're making sure those duties are segregated. There's a thing in all local governments called a check request. You get an invoice from a vendor, or you go buy something, you submit it on a check request to finance, and they pay the vendor. We're going to dramatically limit the use of a check request. A check request should be an exception. What you want to do is you want to go through the requisition and purchase order process. That's where all your controls are. That's where all the approvals are. That's where the budget checks and balances come into play. So if we see a check request and we think it should have gone through the purchase order system, we're kicking it back. We're going to make them do it the right way. Weekly check registers need to be reviewed by an accounting manager or the finance director. So that's something we're going to sign off on every single week. You want a different person, you know, cutting the checks as opposed to the person sending the file to the bank for positive pay recognition, things like that. P cards, we talked a lot about P cards. So someone in the finance department, it's usually going to be the accounting manager or finance director, is going to sign off on all P card statements. Now, P card statements in the past, the statements have just come to finance. All you get is on the statement is the date, the vendor, and the amount that was spent. we're gonna be requesting receipts and invoices for all those statements also. Now, they're retained in the department level, but we wanna see them in finance too. We're gonna be double checking everything that goes through on a procurement card. We have great capabilities in our New World financial system that we're not using. One of the accounting manager that we hired, thanks to Benita, he's very technology savvy, and he's bringing us up to current technology standards. So we're gonna start using automated processes for requisitions and purchase orders. Right now, everything's manual. We're gonna digitize all that. It's all gonna be electronic. All the approvals are gonna be in the system, and those approvals are gonna, they're gonna be in line with our purchasing policies, city charter, and state law. So there's no way they can not that anyone's trying to get around those approvals, but everything's gonna be following state law and city charter and city policies. And then finally, we're gonna cross-train all of our accounting staff. That was one of the big concerns that they all told me, well, before they left, is that they weren't cross-trained. So, and I get it, you know, when you're at the top, sometimes you wanna take responsibility, you wanna do it all yourself, but you gotta delegate, you gotta empower your employees to do what they're paid to do. And so everyone's getting cross-trained. It's gonna broaden their education levels and horizons, and it's gonna be a team effort, and that'll help us make sure internal controls are in place. And then finally, thanks again, Benita, they moved payroll from finance to HR, so we can focus on finance functions and not get bogged down in the clutter of payroll, because payroll's consistent, nonstop. So all those things will help us focus on what we need to do to gain the trust and of the council and the public, and doing all this through transparency. So
Todd, that's commendable, and it seems like what you've done is taken what we had been doing 60 years ago, and we just kept doing the same old thing, the same old way, the same old way, the same old way. And now we came to a point where, look, there's a different way to do this. And it's a lot more transparent. It may take a little bit more time, but it's a lot better.
right.
Okay.
And it's not just me. I just want to brag on my staff.
I know,
real quick.
I totally agree.
yeah.
I think, I know where you were.
Yeah.
You were in, that was a mess, you know.
Right.
And I commend you and your staff and everybody for what you had to dig out of, and it's commendable.
Yeah, we got a great staff on board now. So just real quick, the accounting managers, he got a master's degree in accounting. He's been on the audit side. He's been in governmental accounting. He comes with a lot of experience, very technology savvy. Our senior accountant is a CPA, so we always love having a CPA on staff. And then our junior accountant retired from Stephen F. Austin. So she has nothing but governmental accounting experience. So I think we got a really strong team, and I think y'all are gonna see a lot of changes going forward.
Good. Rick, are you satisfied with the audit? Okay. Okay, now, what are we gonna do now? We've got it set up on the agenda as far as an approval, so,
So, if the council wants to wait till the final audit is in to approve it, then I would recommend we schedule a special meeting prior to the I don't want to wait till the May 7th meeting. I think that's pushing too close to what our bond approval is going to be. So that would be my recommendation if you want to wait until the final audit comes in.
I don't want him to have to come back either. I mean,
Well, I'm just saying that I don't want to push it to the May 7th. That's my only concern is waiting to the May 7th regular meeting. So if we're going to have it moved to a new meeting, I'd say my suggestion is we set a special meeting to approve that.
I can approve it
Do-
tonight. to
Do
tell
we
you the
need
truth.
to approve it? That's the question. Do we need to
yes.
approve it?
It says approval.
Yeah, but,
That's what the agenda item says, but are we required to approve it?
that's right. That's my question.
We're
Rick,
not
do you
required
have a-
under our charter to approve it, but it's on the agenda to approve it.
It probably should have said accepted. That'd be my,
Well, why don't we
That's
make
typically
the
what-
motion to accept the audit, and even though or not? I mean, I don't. And
Now-
contingent on,
did y'all receive the draft? Okay,
I mean, we could,
That's my trepidation.
is there some way we can accept?
see, the only reason we didn't forward the draft at any point prior, because we were expecting to get the final, we weren't gonna send you. And then it was a very short time frame where this had occurred.
Is there a way to make, here's my question, is there a way to make the motion and have it that any of us can kick it back and get a meeting if we need to? Does that make sense? Contingent to, I guess I'm asking our attorney here.
Well, we still have the 72-hour notice requirement, so,
I mean, we don't have to meet, is what I'm saying.
no, I mean, to approve, if you're gonna approve something at a later date, you would have to meet to approve that.
Is there a way to make a motion that we accept the audit on next Tuesday, unless somebody objects before then? I don't mean to
Well,
get too
I
tricky.
probably need to
but
discuss that matter before.
Okay, I mean, I'm
Well,
just
I
wondering
may,
if that's
I
an
may be
option.
the only person here
I
who
think we
hasn't
need
No,
to
I
vote
think we need
it,
to
I think we
read
need to
it.
vote it up or down. Just.
on a
somebody make
report that
motion.
you haven't seen.
Yeah,
The-
Absolutely.
The,
Okay.
the only thing I'll say is in terms of setting a date, they need to be able to, if we were going to do a special, they're gonna need to be able to go ahead and print the final. So we have a date unknown on that, and then the 72. So that's the only issue we have now.
Can we accept this
Yeah.
that we have tonight?
well, I'm not comfortable either, accepting something that we really don't have the whole document, but I'm happy to set a meeting. I guess we can't do it. I mean, I don't want you to have to come back. I mean, we could do it over
Well,
the.
we do appreciate that, but if it would help the council for us to do that, we can, absolutely.
Like, I'm so sorry to, yeah.
Table it, we'd have to take it up today. So we need to
What's your, Rick,
To
what's your
move to-
recommendation?
place it on a future agenda.
Could we have a special meeting next
Yep,
Tuesday?
well, what my question is, if we can,
No.
we could also send the draft ahead, and then we can see, once you go ahead and get the time frame on the final, and then we can go ahead and set a date for a special, a very short meeting. I don't know if y'all can even do something during the day, I don't know, or if it's, I mean, we'll look at your schedules and look at what their print schedule is, but we can send the draft out ahead. Again, we didn't send it because it was in draft form, and that was the week prior. So, if we would've known, we would've sent the draft instead.
So, trying to think. I know we're holding up the whole bond, that's the problem. We want to get that bond.
I think if we do it anytime next week,
That's good enough?
I would think, because, they're gonna be looking at, going harder on the market in terms of what the rates will be towards the end of next week, and then holding that until we get closer to the 7th. So, as long as it's the week prior, y'all think that's probably doable from what your IT people?
Think so? Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm just ballparking it, it might be the 1st. I mean, maybe if it's just ballpark, say the 1st, a very. and
The
then we'll
first
try to-
is Tuesday,
the 1st is Wednesday.
Wednesday. So the 30th, could we set a meeting?
Possibly, yeah. 30th is,
Next
but we can,
Tuesday?
but we'll definitely see, hopefully by week's end, we can have the final, and we could send the draft ahead of that.
And the draft will be,
It's gonna be,
I'm comfortable with the draft.
Rhonda can send the draft tomorrow morning, and, y'all obviously would have that to look at over the weekend as well, and then we'll get the other. as
I'm
soon as
even
we can.
comfortable on Monday, even a quick meeting Monday. Good.
Do you want him to come back, Chad?
no. No, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's not because your hair is shorter.
No, I understand. I wouldn't want to sit through this spiel again either.
No, you've done a fantastic job, and that's not my intention at all with any of this discussion. It's that we're talking about approving our annual audit, and all we've had is a presentation. I would like to see the document.
Well, he can,
What if you got
Right.
questions you need to ask?
Mayor,
dial
we
in.
can have him appear virtual.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we could have him dial in for that,
Tell them.
unless he's got a haircut scheduled.
You wanna do it Monday,
Poor man.
Monday at noon?
It's good to me.
Monday at noon, how about that?
I'm in class until 1:15, but
Perfect.
You can send in objections too if you,
I can.
okay. Monday at noon?
Monday at noon? Is that good? Okay. We do that right? Okay. All right, if you'll
So-
post that, Rhonda, for Monday at noon, and,
A motion that we,
Yeah,
or
we're gonna have to
or
make
no.
a motion on this.
that we
6D.
defer it till Monday? Or?
no action.
No action, and we're gonna schedule a special meeting for Monday
Yeah.
noon,
Right.
correct?
Right. Okay, no action on item 6D, and we'll schedule a new meeting at noon, Monday, the 29th, at at noon, and to look at the papers. Okay. All right, is that it? Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, next item. Item 6A, consider approval of an aviation fuel general services contract with Titan Aviation Fuels for A.L. Mangum Jr. Regional Airport.
Good evening, council, mayor, thanks for having me. Airport Manager Colin Smith. So we buy wholesale fuel currently from Titan Aviation Fuels to resell at the airport. And we had a five-year contract that's ending next month. And so we put RFPs out on the street and gathered those in March. Had a committee review those, made up of myself, someone from finance, and a couple of our airport advisory board members. The committee has recommended moving forward and renewing with Titan for a new 3-year contract, and it'll have 2 1-year optional extensions, just like our last contract had with them. We've been very satisfied with their service, and their focus is airports our size, and we feel very comfortable with that. This is, again, a 3-year contract. We've set the not-to-exceed amount at $725,000. We're hedging that for inflation and fuel prices and a hopeful increase in fuel sales. For perspective, I think we bought $570-something thousand worth last year. And our budget for this year is $500,000. So hopefully I'm coming to you before the year's end asking you for an adjustment of that because we're selling extra fuel than we thought. And as you know, the proceeds, the profits, so to say, of the fuel sales is what significantly supports the airport's operating budget. So it's our moneymaker. But I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Well, you made profit last year, didn't you? Off of your sales?
Well, we make a profit off every gallon we sell. Our operating budget and the profits are about equal, a little less, a little more. So yeah, we're almost break even. I don't want to promise we're going to be break even, but in operating budgets is almost all covered by profits from fuel sales, which we don't have a lot of control over the whole fuel sales thing. It's weather dependent, it's traffic dependent. There's a lot of things that go into it, but we do what we can. We try to set our prices competitively to attract people, but we also try to maintain margins to help cover our costs. It's a fine dance, and we don't have a lot of controls over that, but we do our best to do that.
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
So I'll make the motion that we approve item 6B as written.
Second?
Oh, yeah, 6A.
6A.
Thank you so much. All right, item 6A. I was looking at both of them. So anyway, item 6A is written. Thanks.
Second. Motion, have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item, 6B, consider approval of a airport fuel tank lease agreement with Titan Aviation Fuels for a replacement truck used for dispensing aviation gas fuel at the A.L. Mangum Jr. Regional Airport.
Do you want the motion, or do you want to?
I can explain it if you would like. It's just an upgrade, and our truck is 22 years old, and it's being used a lot more now that we full serve the flight school, and we use it a lot, a lot more. It's time for an upgrade, and this is what this. We actually lease these fuelers from Titan. That's typical to lease them from the vendor. So.
Well, so I'll make the motion that we approve item 6B as written.
Second.
Have a motion second. All in favor? Aye. Motion
you.
carries. Thank you. Next item, item 6C. Consider approval of a contract by and between the City of Nacogdoches and Craftsman's Commercial Playgrounds in the amount of $180,000 for design and construction of a splash pad at 1100 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
Mayor, Council, Jessica South, Community Services Director. The item I have before you today is a design-build contract with Craftsman Commercial Playgrounds. This is a not-to-exceed amount of $180,000, and this is to replace the current spray station we have over at Temple Park. Historically, Temple Park was home to the Temple Pool, which was put in place in the late 1950s, early 1960s. Later was closed. Then we installed the Temple Spray Station in 2000. After 24 years of use, that spray station is no longer functional. It's kind of an old system that you don't commonly see anymore. It doesn't necessarily meet safety standards. So what we're proposing today is putting a splash pad in its place, similar to what we have over at Moroni Park with Splashadoches. This contract is with Craftsman Commercial Playgrounds. They are located out of Spring, Texas. You can see here some examples of some Texas-based splash pads they've put in. They're pretty comparable size and price to the one we're proposing today. This contract is great because it is a buy-board company, but it's a design-build contract, so it allows the city to design the splash pad with the company, and then they will bring everything to us, install all of it. We are also saving a little money on the contract and putting all of the $180,000 into the splash pad equipment by having our parks crew demolish what is currently there. Our guys are very good at tearing things down. So they're gonna do that portion for us. And here is a picture of what is currently there, will be removed, and then everything we put up will be similar to Splashadoches, where it'll be ground-based items, sprayers, things of that nature, not playground equipment to climb on. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
What happens to the playground equipment?
So that if there is any metal that's still usable, that is typically sold off at a metal recycling. For a lot of the play structures, they look really great in this picture. Up close, a lot of the plastic is starting to fall apart, starting to chip. So most of the equipment will go into the landfill.
When did they put that up?
This play structure was put up in 2000. And a general time frame for those, they generally last about 10 to 12 years. Our parks guys are great about repairing, repainting, replacing items that are starting to rust, but it's exceeded its lifespan.
And this was a well-used spray station.
It absolutely was. It's been closed to the public for about a year, so we're very excited to get started on this process. It's about a 180-day project, depending upon what features we pick. If we pick pretty common spray structures that are in stock, it'll get here a little bit faster. If we pick out something with a ton of bells and whistles that's very specialized, it takes a little bit longer to get here. So we're excited to put something new at this park and get it used again.
Where's this money coming from, Jessica?
This is in our capital improvement plan. So this $180,000 is separate from anything with the bond. This was fully funded through capital improvements.
And it is in budget.
Yes, sir.
You had a lot of problems with Moroni's splash pad, didn't you?
We did. This system is actually going to be different. Moroni is a recirculating system. So it goes into a large tank that then is cleaned with chlorine and sprayed back out. The problems we have over there is that since it's recirculating, anything that drains into that tank gets stuck. This system is not like this. It fully drains out using city utilities, and the new splash pad we'll be putting in will not require any utility upgrades. It'll be just about the same amount of water that's used in the current spray station as the new splash pad equipment. So we don't anticipate there being those problems because we're not recirculating. You know, anything that drains out will just go into the sewer system. It won't be sprayed back through the sprayers.
I will, if there are no other questions, I'll make a motion. We approve item 6C as presented.
Second the motion?
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
That concludes our regular scheduled board, council meeting. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.087, we will go into executive session at 6:28. Back in a minute. Roddy, you have to remind me about Monday. I'll forget it. About Monday, I'll forget it.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, there you go. Here you go. This is all this. It is 7:05, and we are returning from executive session pursuant to Government Code Section 551.087. No action. Thank you very much for coming. God bless the great city of Nacogdoches, Texas.